Hello, good evening and welcome to the Hot Seat. In the Hot Seat today is a guest who has spent almost a lifetime in the military, and today we have Admiral Dennis Blair, the former Director of National Intelligence in the United States and currently the President of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA. Good evening, Admiral Blair, and welcome to the Hot Seat.
Nice to be here. Nice to be back in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. When is the last time you visited Sri Lanka?
It was 2001 when the war was going on, and I was the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Command. Paid a visit and met my military counterparts, so that was 14 years ago. You must have noticed the change. Yes. I told several people when I came from the airport last time I had to pass Army checkpoints. The hotel where we stayed was surrounded by barbed wire and sandbags, so it's much nicer now in Colombo. Oh, good. And so the change is noticeable. Yes, noticeable and very, very positive. And how, for somebody who lives and doesn't have much to do in Sri Lanka or with Sri Lanka, how do you view Sri Lanka from a distance? Is it a little troublesome hotspot, or? Well, I think it because of the contrast from the years of the Civil War. I think most Americans think of Sri Lanka as a success story. The Civil War ended. The country is developing. The economic growth rate is increasing. So I think that most Americans think that over the long run, Sri Lanka is moving in the right direction. As a military man, and you must have observed these things from time to time, there have been claims that the Sri Lankan armed forces perhaps engaged in matters that were not by the rules. And yet Sri Lankan members of the armed forces make up send troops to the UN peacekeeping force, for example. How do you view it? Do you view the Sri Lankan armed forces as generally rather disciplined? When I dealt with the Sri Lankan forces back in 1999, 2000, 2001, they were fighting a very difficult opponent. At that time, the Tamil Tigers were the ones who were starting this business of suicide bombings, first with individuals, then with vehicles, and then with boats they were doing. And unfortunately, they were the world leaders in these tactics, which have since been developed by other terrorist organizations around the world. And I thought that the Sri Lankan armed forces were handling those were handling a difficult opponent in a pretty good way. The laws of war cannot be suspended even if you're fighting an opponent that uses terror tactics. It's still the responsibility of armed forces to. So that's a fact you can't get away from. You can't. You have to operate that way, right. and you have to do it for two reasons. Number one, the ethic of the warrior is that you are protecting your country. You are protecting the weak. You're not using your power against an innocent person, even if your enemy is. That's how professional military people think. But the second one is that every war must end. Every war must lead to a reconciliation of some side. So as a soldier, as a sailor, you cannot cause hatred and resentment, and you can't start another war while you're winning the war that you have. So you have to act with restraint and with professional conduct. And if some of your troops or your officers fail to meet that standard, they have to be disciplined. That's what soldiers and sailors understand.
How did the United States, for example, deal with any transgressions on the part of their forces in places like, say, Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else that the Americans have been?
Yeah, it goes back further than that. There was the famous incident during the Vietnam War of the My Lai massacre, in which an American company, having been taken fire repeatedly from a village, went in and wiped out the village and killed a bunch of civilians. And it took a while for that to come to light, but when it did, court-martial was convened, investigation was done, and those who were responsible were given sentences. More recently, in Iraq, for example, in Abu Ghraib, the prison that was run by the U.S. Army in Baghdad, there were terrible things done by the military police who were running that prison. One of the soldiers who was in the prison thought that this was wrong, took some pictures, handed them to a superior officer outside of the prison. There was a big investigation. People were punished. So you have to continually evaluate your conduct and your conduct. And actually, the more irregular the war is, the more you have to pay attention to that kind of because the natural thing is when you have a ruthless enemy who hides behind women and children, who puts mortars into churches and mosques and temples and shoots them from there, who takes advantage of your humane way of war in order to kill your soldiers, the natural tendency of the soldier is going to be very strong in response. So that has to be controlled. That has to be subject to discipline. That's the way it has to be handled.
We'll take a short break and come back to the hot seat in just a moment. Welcome back to the hot seat, where our guest tonight is Admiral Dennis Blair. Admiral Blair, could you tell me a little bit about your work with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation? What does it all do?
Certainly. I'm the chairman of the U.S. branch of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. The Sasakawa Peace Foundation is an interesting story. Mr. Sasakawa was a fairly controversial figure in Japan in the 1930s and during the war. He actually was arrested as a war criminal, but then was never brought to trial. After the war, he became very successful as the person who ran the legalized gambling operation in Japan. He made a great deal of money, and
gaming center.
The betting was on motorboat racing. That was the form of betting in post-war Japan, which had been devastated by the war. But like some men who make a lot of money, he decided that he should put it to a good cause, created a foundation, and the foundation is the largest in Japan. It has operations throughout Asia, here in Sri Lanka. Some of the subsidiary foundations have built schools, and it's the biggest organization, for instance, that combats leprosy, which has been reduced in most countries, but still is a problem in other places. And it does have a office in the United States that I'm in charge of, and we work on the relationship between the United States and Japan. So it's a very diverse charitable organization. And former military man and so on. And how are you enjoying the difference? Right. Well, it's not as big an organization as I used to be in charge of, but it's. In the armed forces, you train and you train for something that you hope doesn't happen.
Right.
And then when it happens, you're actually in combat. There are a lot of parts of that are pretty difficult too. You want to win, you want to do it right, but your friends are wounded and killed. Other people are too. So that's tough, but it's necessary. So it's nice to be in an organization which is trying to keep things peaceful, and it's trying to make things happen without violence. So I enjoy it. It's a nice phase of my life.
While she was saying that, I thought to myself, this question's just come up. How do you deal with having to tell a mother, father, family that their own little hero has been killed in action?
Yeah, it's the hardest thing you do. You can only feel good about that as a commander if you have done everything you can to make the operation as safe as possible and as necessary as possible. And whenever somebody is in your military organization is killed, you constantly think, should I have done something different? Should I have thought about it? And so there's a lot of doubt and worry and sleeplessness and all. And then when you have to tell the family, that's very hard. The only way you can do it is by knowing that the people who join the armed forces do it because they wanted to. They believe in what they did, and you try to honor their sacrifice. That's the only way it works.
The average American, when he sees news of Sri Lanka, probably on the television, on the internet now, are they concerned that democracy and human rights are all in good shape, even though this country is a tiny little dot, several thousand kilometers away, several hours flying time away?
Yes, we are concerned, and the march of democracy in the world is an uneven march. Sometimes it seems to be making great progress, and other times it seems to be going backwards. And I think that frankly speaking, until January of this year, those of us who followed Sri Lanka felt that things were going in the wrong direction. That the government was assuming executive powers that were not warranted. And then we saw the people of Sri Lanka speak in January with the election that was clearly felt that Sri Lanka should be moving in a different direction. We watched the 100 Days program, and so we were cheering for the people of Sri Lanka, who we think were moving their country in a democratic direction. And what I've learned is that democracy is not some Anglo-Saxon Western concept, but it's the way people want to live in order to be able to raise their children to do what they want to do, in order to have economic opportunity, in order to not to be oppressed by either the government or by others. And I think it's pretty universal. And when it moves forward the way it has recently in Sri Lanka, we cheer. When it moves backwards, we try to we're saddened, and we try to help to change things.
And on that sort of thing, and was it President Kennedy who said that democracy isn't easy? But isn't it better for the American, the British, the West, to engage with the government of Sri Lanka on a basis of gently prodding and highlighting the need,
right,
as opposed to doing that and waving the stick and saying, "Come on"?
I agree with that. I think it's what's worse is if you completely shun a country and say, "We're not going to deal with you until you become democratic."
Yeah.
That makes no sense. You have to engage, and you have to support the people within a country who who are supporting democracy. You have to oppose the people within a country who are trying to become authoritarian or dictatorial, and you can't do that unless you're there. So I think we need to. I think we need to engage. For instance, in the military, on the military side in particular, I think I often criticize American policies which say we do not have any military contact with a country until it is democratic. Well, wait a minute. we should bring military officers from other countries to our schools. We should work with them in other ways so they can learn what military forces in a democracy look like, and when they go back to their own country, they know how to behave. And so I think some of the restrictions, military restrictions we put on places like Myanmar, we have in the past on Sri Lanka, are misguided. Now, I agree that we should not take Sri Lankan troops and teach them to shoot better if those troops are being used to oppress the people. However, Sri Lankan officers in conferences and schools, and we should be talking with all of the time. Same thing with Myanmar. Same thing with other countries over the years. So I think you're right. The best thing is to engage. And as for how much you shake your finger and how much you talk behind the scenes, you have to do some of both. I think you can't
try and find the happy medium.
You have to find the medium. You can't sit there completely silent when something terrible is happening in front of your eyes. You have to let the people know, whether they're Americans or anybody else, that this is not right. This is not acceptable. On the other hand, you shouldn't sit there like a school teacher and grade the paper for every single person. So it's a case of balance. So.
Thank you. Let's take another break and come right back to the hot seat. Welcome back to the hot seat, where we have as our guest tonight Admiral Dennis Blair. Admiral Blair, I don't suppose this interview will be complete without me asking you this. What is the story about you skiing behind your warship?
Oh, I see. Right. Well, you have to realize when you're out at sea on a ship for a long time, it can get pretty boring, so you look for different things to do. And I always thought that it would be pretty cool to water ski behind the USS Cochrane, which I was in command of at the time. So I hatched a plan that I would ski behind one of the small boats. We would come behind the big ship. The big ship would put a line out, and I would reach down and pick up that line. I would let go
of the
other one, take a quick picture, and then that would be the end of it. But what I didn't realize was it's a lot rougher in the stern of the ship than I had realized. So when I got back here, I was bouncing up and down, and so I missed the pickup and fell over. Now, you could also ask me, why was I doing it? Why didn't I ask somebody who was a good water skier to do it? And the answer was, I was the captain. I figured I had to take the responsibility, and it was foolish to have anybody else do it. So,
did you get into any trouble?
I did not, because nobody knew about it for many years until somebody put it on my Wikipedia entry.
So, what was your other highlight in your military or your career as the director of intelligence?
Yes, as director of intelligence, the things that I thought were the most effective was when I could bring attention of decision makers to a problem that was still in its formative stage, so that we could stand a chance of doing something about it early. Many of the problems that we face as a country, that every country faces, are when things have gotten so bad that all your choices are difficult, all your choices are expensive. So I tried as a director of national intelligence to look a little bit over the hill to try to, and some of the things that I highlighted fairly early on as threats were things like cyber threats. And although we still have a lot of work to do. I like to think that I brought attention to that at an early stage, and then also you try to find opportunities as well as threats to talk about things where your country can do something that will make good things happen as opposed to dealing with bad things. So I tried to identify some of the opportunities, for example, here in Asia, in terms of working with countries that were developing, whether they be Indonesia, which made progress in a lot of areas, or some of the other countries of Southeast Asia. So it was those are the things that I feel proudest of when I look back.
Wonderful. I want to ask you two quick questions. One, I wonder if you can share with us, Admiral Blair, in your entire career thus far, what is there one thing that you are immensely proud of? What is the most significant one thing?
I can't pick out one thing, but I can tell you something that makes me proud when I see somebody who I trained, who has moved up to a job and is doing that job very well. I think,
when you look at him on the TV?
I looked at him on the TV, or I read about him in the paper, or her, and I say, well, I had a hand in that person's development.
And that gives you a lot of satisfaction.
I think that's the highest satisfaction that I feel. Yeah.
And finally, on our network, on Newsfirst, Capital Maharaja network, we have a little segment which we do, and it's called The Secrets of Success. A younger colleague will die if he knows that I'm asking you the question, but let me ask you that question.
Sure.
Can you share with us, Admiral Blair, what is the secret to your success?
My motto has always been to try to leave whatever job I was doing a little bit better than I found it. Just try to make things better, and I think if you do that, you're going to be all right. And
what do you do? What about failure? How do you deal with failure?
I think every failure is a learning experience, and another one of my mottos is make new mistakes. I hate to make old mistakes, but if you keep trying, you may make new ones, but you will be attempting to move forward.
Admiral Blair, it's been an absolute pleasure having you in the hot seat, and thank you very much. And do come back to Sri Lanka and spend a bit more time.
I look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.